All right, so to start today out, we're going to continue on with close reading, but today we're going to start out thinking about text-dependent questions or TDQs. So if you would open up your note catcher.
I'm sorry? One of those things.
Sorry, I had my page marked and it wasn't the right page. So 23, yes. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes on page 23. You're going to read the text in your note catcher. All right. Yeah, read the text in your note catcher and create an exemplar student response to this question. So remember, an exemplar would be what would be like the best answer. Okay. What would you want? All right, so with the partner, I want you to discuss what does this question require students to do, and what does a strong student response look like for this question, or these questions, or 2 questions.
Okay. Well, the first one I put cheerful anticipation, whimsical elements woven into it. It's looking questions asking students to understand the atmosphere the author's trying to create.
It's not exactly the same question.
No, I mean, I have.
It's the same.
It is like this.
in a way that helps the
It's
students.
just it was an extra
Second, we put the words I put in Christmas house, there's chimney hopes and some Nicholas, and the phrase not even close. The second one is supposed to be trying to get students to back up their answer with affection others, so they agree. I was thinking about it with their. So long, let's go.
I think you're right. I just understand how to do it.
Yes, ingestion more than drugs, so you can act like a novice.
Well, I know that I didn't. Did it read? I didn't read.
Okay, our objectives for this session are to understand what text-dependent questioning is and the criteria for what makes a strong text-dependent question. Understand the criteria for strong student responses to text-dependent questions and use the student look-fors in the student response criteria to distinguish between exemplar and non-exemplar student responses to text-dependent questions. So you're going to hear me say TDQ, that's text-dependent questions. So just in case you hear that, it's just a lot easier. So, it doesn't have my agenda showing. So we're just going to spend some time looking through evaluating student responses, crafting the exemplar responses for this session. All right, so why this content? Remember our 3 instructional shifts: complexity, evidence, and knowledge. This session on rethinking text-dependent questions is going to help us more deeply understand the second shift, evidence. So can someone please read the second shift for me? Yeah.
Reading, writing, and speaking grounded in evidence from text, both literary and informational.
In this session, we're going to see what the shift of evidence looks like in action, both on the part of the teacher and on the part of the student. So going back to our reader circles. So yesterday we took a journey through the reader circles to deepen our understanding of the Prometheus text. So here's an example of one of the questions we worked with in our last session, which we identified as a question that brings readers into that second circle, the elements and structure. So what do you notice about this question? What does it make students do? Well, this whole, because that second question builds off of the first question.
If we prefer draw conclusion.
Okay.
Analyze the character.
What does it force the students to do in order to do all those things? Yes. It forces the reader to go back to the text. They must read that text closely and understand it fully in order to answer this question.
So it's like it gives them an answer automatically. Like he doesn't give them 5, so they know that.
Yeah.
But the question's why. So they kind of feel good a little bit, like they know what they're looking for in the question.
Exactly. So they're able to, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. We kind of hit on something. No, that's good. You're clicking and getting something before.
Okay.
So all the questions we examined yesterday were not only examples of how we move through the reader circles, but they were also examples of text-dependent questions. All right, so here we have some examples and some non-examples of TDQs. Take a few moments, about 3 minutes, to review these these questions on your own. And as you're reading, think about how would you describe text-dependent questions and what distinguishes text-dependent questions from non-TDQs. You can also look at page 24 in your note capture if you need to see that up there. after you've read through them, discuss with your little table group or a partner the questions that are at that bottom that I just.
Delete it.
Seriously, it should be.
And I'm trying to figure
Grades
out
of the tools
And
if you've got a teacher.
really specifically relies on augmented reality as a concept for engagement in this. So they have to make an objective connection between the areas.
And really summarized to do that, we got the idea of that year. And it would still go back to.
So what makes these, what makes these text submitted questions strong? Or what makes them strong?
They have to go back to the text.
They have to go back to the text, okay? Do what? You have to have read the text. You can't just guess, right?
Or objectively correct answers.
Anyone else? All right, so what are text-dependent questions? I think we all pretty much know this, but a text-dependent question is a question that can be answered only by going to the text. It takes the reader back to the text, not away from it. You know, sometimes we ask questions, or like it previously, we would ask questions and like kids would be like, oh, that reminds me of this, and like do the text itself. But then they go way over to like the left field and like never, you have to try to pull them back. And we still have that sometimes, but at least you can say, where did you find that in the text? Oh, it's not there. You know, you can pull them back easily when you do text-dependent questions. So these questions make the text the expert in the room, essentially leveling the playing field for all students because they can all find the answers in the text. It's all there for them. So these 3 bullets on the left, the text-dependent questions push students to rely solely on the text, must be traceable back to the text and cannot be answered based on personal opinion or background knowledge alone. Now, you can use your personal opinion and background knowledge in order to combine it, you know, with the text and answer a question, but not alone. So, what are the criteria? Let's just review them quickly. A strong TDQ can only be answered by reading the text, requires the reader to use evidence from the text to support their answer, is worded in a way that is accessible to all students, addresses important ideas, concepts, details, and structural elements in the text, and is aligned to grade level standards. So again, text-dependent questions make the text the expert, so they cannot be answered alone based on background knowledge or personal opinion. So what is the purpose for TDQs? Why do we ask them? What do y'all think? What's the purpose for TDQ?
Give the student a deeper understanding of the text.
Say that louder.
To get a deeper understanding of the text.
Okay. Anything else?
So they have it, giving evidence for their answers, not simply popping out the answers.
Yeah. So that goes into supporting them like with their writing too, because they're having to go back when they're answering just questions in class to find evidence to support it.
It goes back to what we talked about last month about being ready for college.
Yeah. Definitely. Anyone else? So we ask them in order to prepare them for college and prepare them for their writing and for us to see if they are getting that deeper understanding of the text. So what does this image show? Scaffolding. So how does this connect to TDQs then? You have to build, right? You have to, just like we scaffold, we were talking about scaffolding with the reader circle, how we start small and we kind of build up. The same thing. It kind of all connects. So, text-dependent questions help readers build meaning of a text, and they act as a scaffold, supporting students in assessing and understanding text. So they're actually an instructional tool for supporting students. And they aren't just formative assessments. So that shouldn't be the only reason why you're asking text-dependent questions. They're actually scaffolds for building that understanding of the text.
Maybe, we want the students more, used to, how you say it, to writing that language.
Yeah.
And they have to go to the text, instead of just, they don't like to do that, they want to be written in their own words, but they're forced to go to the text. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I find more comfort there, though, as opposed to just having to come up with something off the top of my head. A lot of times I don't know where to get started. But if I have to go back and I feel like I'm being led there, then I feel more comfort in my answer choice. It's more confident.
Yes, definitely. So let's think.
It builds your confidence too.
It does.
Because as you get the easier ones, I got that right, I see where I got it wrong and make corrections, the next ones get much easier because they're building confidence in themselves.
Definitely. So let's think back to our reader circles to answer this question. How do TDQs act as a scaffold? So, why don't you turn and talk about that question? How do TDQs act as a scaffold? I kind of gave you a hint earlier, what you thinking.
Well, it needs to build through the circles. You typically would ask foundational level and build up from there to get to the interpretive point. Text evidence have to think through what they're saying and how it deals with the text, not just some random.
If we say, the character change, I mean, other character, became older.
You're calling attention to that change.
Yeah.
Yes.
The name started.
Yeah.
So I'm going
And that's that in a way.
I was gonna say it builds confidence.
Locate.
and they're
Yes.
more willing
You go back to that.
Which is like, more of those, reading notes and exercise are one of those.
I remember Christopher last
I'm
year.
gonna have Lindsay
Getting
share
grades.
something real quick about her students. If you don't know Lindsay, she's a special ed teacher at the junior high. So
I was just saying that with the scaffolding, and it starts low, you build on their skills. A lot of times our students are self-conscious because they have a hard time coming up with an answer on their own, like Ms. McKeon was saying. So once the material is there for them, and they can go there and pull the answer from that, and once they have the skill of finding the text evidence and using that as their answer, then that builds their confidence level, and they're more willing to share in a whole group or small group even.
all right. So
Dollar more.
That's what I find, is they go and find an answer, but have nothing to do with the question.
Or they give up.
But what the text from the text.
Text,
Yeah, so that's what we're kind of coming together today, doing, and in the next module, which I was about to talk about anyway. So asking that strong text-dependent question is a great start, but our work doesn't end there, right? It's equally important for students to provide text-based responses that are correct. So in Module 4, which will be September 10th, I went and double checked, we're going to come back and we're going to explore specific strategies for supporting our students and strengthening those text-dependent questions or their answers to text-dependent questions. So today, for our purposes, we just want to focus on what makes a good text-dependent answer or question and just establishing that vision of excellence. So what does a strong text-based response look like? And what tools in the guidebooks exist to support us in establishing this vision of excellence? So in your note catcher on page 25, there are 2 student responses. I'm going to give you about a minute and a half to read through them. They're not very long. So just read independently those 2 responses.
Just checking. Put it on my calendar.
That's what
I'm going to go through after today and put all of them on there. And then after all.
Good, thank
I was
you.
like,
Yellow.
what? Sushi stuff.
I was like,
All right, so I want you to think, pair, share. Which response is stronger? How do you know? And what does each response tell us about what each student does or does not understand? So just think about those questions and then pair up with somebody at your table and share your answers.
no, I'm laughing, and I read it, it's just, I read the second one, I was like,
Fire to one.
This one's like
knowledge.
Yeah, because it's, I think, that's not.
They'll just give it a code, and then when it's read, they won't set it up. or
the other one seems to be in the
Some of
things.
Or like in.
Like off their prior knowledge.
Right.
Because I don't know.
Yeah,
It's like-
but it has.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we see a lot of, I think, changing things, I think.
The second one, you see, I think.
That's all.
I see.
Can't do it on their
Yeah. You know, and certain types of essays.
The first one gives what it says with a
So
great
it's not so much
explanation.
they were taught.
Text, let alone
But
they really understand.
No doubt.
That's what they wanted. So now the target right there.
And this is what I need to see.
Which one do you think is stronger?
The first.
So example 1, correct. So why is example 1 stronger than example 2?
Evidence-based.
It's text-based. So what did you see in example 2 that made it weak?
I think.
I think it's more of an opinion.
So it's opinion-based, right?
They related it more to prior knowledge, like,
Yeah. So they took some things that were outside of the text and brought it into their response. So there are 3 core criteria for a strong text dependent response that we're going to focus on, not only in this session, but also in our cycle of inquiry, which will be in session 4, or module 4. And that's when y'all are going to bring in some student work and we're going to evaluate their responses. So in a strong student response, the student responds directly to the question asked with a valid assertion drawn from the text. They select evidence provided from the text that is relevant, so the evidence supports the assertion and is sufficient. So there's enough evidence given to support the assertion. And it's able to clearly articulate a relevant and valid connection between the evidence given and the assertion. So let's look at criteria number 1 and go back to example number 1 in your note catcher and see where you find, it says, find evidence that the student responds directly to the question asked with a valid assertion drawn from the text. So that was on page 5. So those examples, so look in there and see where that student responds directly to the question asked with a valid assertion drawn from the text.
Want to share? He starts out with the answer on the question, but then continues with the text to support the answer.
Okay.
You can realize that knowledge means power is a sort of
Okay.
concept that he's drawing from what is right.
Do you think that is that where they're responding directly to the question? Or do you think it might be how they have that connection between the quote and the... So now this right here does not mean that they have a quote right here. So this one might, this is like their claim.
The first sentence.
This is their claim right here. So what's their claim?
I think it's the first sentence.
Okay, so it's a valid claim, right? So do you all,
You're losing control.
yeah,
He puts it, and that's right, he's right about that.
Yeah.
So then he explains it with his evidence.
so then he selects evidence that's relevant and sufficient. So how many pieces of evidence did he give? So one, but was it like a little bitty, like 3-word quote?
No, it was a long quote.
Yeah, it was a pretty long quote. And it was relevant. It actually related back to his actual claim, right? Or her claim. And then at the bottom, they have that connection, that relevant and valid connection. And part of what Jesse said earlier was the connection, but then the student continues on
Break it
and tells a
down.
little bit more about the connection, where he said, or she says, it also reveals a lot about, right?
Yeah, which is really, like, clearly articulated. Wow, this is.
Yeah, so this student understood this question, understood the text. We all know this student, like, if I mean, would y'all be happy if you got this for one question?
Yes.
You know? It's a short response on a question, I'd be thrilled. So, you know, it's kind of hard sometimes when you have those text-dependent questions to figure out what it should look like. But in your teaching notes of your guidebooks lessons, you have these student look-fors, which describe the big ideas that students should demonstrate in response to specific questions. So in many cases, they provide potential quotes and evidence. So, but know that those are not the only quotes or the only pieces of evidence that can support their claim. Just, you know. And then they're also an incredibly helpful resource when considering whether or not students' responses meet the criteria that we just discussed. So take a moment and you can either look on page 26 in your note pager if you can't read that up there, or you can read it up here. So those are the student look-fors for this question that we just, the student response was about. So as you read these look-fors, go back and think about that student response. And was everything there? Or was the student on the right track? So according to these look-fors, how does a student response demonstrate evidence of learning in this text? Or evidence of understanding of this text? And what y'all discuss at your tables. So the student used the same quotes.
That quote
Was
from
it?
the first one, to take out a few of the words.
Yeah.
When you're on conclusion, your character goes to conclusion, stuff like that, it's hard to demonstrate.
So once you have these look-fors in your pocket or in your back pocket, You will have a clear vision of excellence for what exemplar responses should look like, making it much easier to navigate those misconceptions that pop up all the time in class, and making it easier for you to prompt students and guide them towards a better response. So, in your note catcher on page 27, you have this question and the look-fors for this question. So this is a different question. This is on page 27. So I'm going to give you about a minute, 2 minutes to read through the look-fors for this question. What motivates Prometheus to defy Jupiter? What does this reveal about his character? And then I'll have some discussion questions. So once you're finished, I want you to discuss at your tables, what must an exemplar student response to this question demonstrate? And what might an exemplar student response include? Maybe find the evidence or the connection. Think about what an exemplar student response to this question.
That's it. It's a bad shape. That's like
Characterization of motivation, characterization of using text only to support it. Also visits a question about his response, what motivates him to comply. So understanding Jupiter is the first step. So the first question actually scaffolds to this question.
So what must the exemplar student response to this question demonstrate? So what the student understanding for this question, what would it be?
Motivation for this.
Okay. They have to know that what motivated Prometheus to defy Jupiter, right? And then they have to have evidence to support it. And what else? A connection, right? So just remember that. You have to have your claim, your evidence, and that connection between them. So what we're going to do is on pages 28 through 30 in your note catcher, there are some sample responses to this question. What I want you to do is with a partner, evaluate these student responses, discuss, does the student response demonstrate the key understanding outlined in the look-fors? And think about those 3 criteria, evaluate it using the 3 criteria. So we need to know, are these strong responses or not? And what do these students need in order to make it a little bit stronger? So claim, evidence, and connection, those are the 3 criteria. So making that valid assertion, giving some evidence to support it, and then the connection between the 2.
No text.
11.
I would say just.
Statement.
The time's not like. That's not possible.
Yeah. I have a feeling that would just be my. I'm down 4.
I didn't mind that. Quote was the first example, I bet that was the quote. I would-
So I'm taking it up with that already.
Lines of quotes, because they'll like give you a paragraph. Anyway, this.
It just seems like every one of them is
Very
passing.
inclusive, it's awesome. Great,
Did you say my name?
I did.
Say Howie's offices, it doesn't touch on Jupiter's character, contrast and stuff like that. It was so good.
You've been working on
Sad and over.
Well, just 2 days. No, but it's just, but like y'all and that, even April had homeless this 4 years that were class. So now I'm taking people out and putting them.
acting like I'm okay with that.
I'm rearranging, but every one of them brings a class. You may end up with 10, maybe.
Good.
But I'm I'm taking them out of your big classes.
Yeah.
And I'm moving them around so that y'all have as many.
Right.
But it's just, it's
It's
a hot one.
Yeah.
I've done with 8th grade. We did 8th grade while I was here last week. I think
That was
it's
just
7th grade.
Okay, I'm gonna give y'all about 5 more minutes to look at these 4 student responses.
Yes, but that's not part. And then we were where at that time when we get to the structure. There's no connection between we haven't got a claims so they have evidence and they can forget random.
This isn't their.
I'm thinking, right?
I'm not saying that there is one answer that, I'm not saying there's one answer that is just like, oh my gosh. No, angels are shining.
I don't know.
Like, this is like which one, yeah. So are they giving a claim, a valid claim? Is there sufficient evidence and, the evidence is relevant? And do they say that would make sure yeah, I mean, and you gotta think this is an 8th grade student. Probably not the kids that you hear you like, they do. No. And this isn't like a huge essay. This is not supposed to be an essay. This is like, okay, question. Yeah, yeah. But this is, you're having a cheap out, yeah, and yeah,
She's doing.
so we're not great, and there it will come a time that you do great grammar and spelling and all that, but we're not right now.
That's the scope one, that's the lens one.
And it's not.
We want the competition.
But we need to understand X first. And understanding, and the word is a little bit. Yeah, that's.
It's on numerous points, it has textual evidence. I think it meets the criteria, it doesn't have everything, but it's not a checklist for everything you must have. It's the things we're looking for, so you're getting.
Yeah,
So he has most of the stuff.
this might be a question you give in class, or just like in a note card, you can write your answer on, you know? So,
As long as everybody next week,
yeah.
There's a portion of it.
Then they forgot that.
I feel like you're talking to me and you got somewhere and that's where I'm at.
You stopped too early, though. Here's the thing that made him sad, he said that it's saddened by what he saw and wanted to make life better for the humans. That's the claim. That he wanted to make life better, and it's a little bit low. But that's what the claim is. I mean, so he was on support that he wanted to make life better.
Yeah.
So it's consistent.
Have you looked at these back here?
I think so,
Yeah, but this, but.
Read it. So this guy is like this. You're like this one, you get over here.
Well, it was beautiful, as the other pieces were.
So this is missing.
The next day, we go, like,
And when you read it last,
they only got it once, so they're not struggling to learn.
That's what we said.
Trying to get them to change that the second time.
No claims, no quotes, no explanation.
They're home there on. So we're just looking at it, but then, like, next year, either behind where we're at, and they can see what lessons they're on, and you have to do some repair,
Yes.
like that, because I downloaded everything, so just look at the PowerPoint, and see if they get your notes on it. And it has all of that, and it's changed. Yeah. So that you can prepare a little bit further ahead, so you know what lessons are on, but they have to do
Yes.
And there's also the dates are different, you can't just, working on like, I downloaded them all, and I put them on a Google Drive. And so y'all can just go to Google Drive instead of going to
All right, so which of the four responses do you feel like was the strongest? Which one? So number two? Yeah. Go to her? Yeah. So what made this one stronger than the rest?
It responded to the.
Okay, valid assertion of claims.
Okay, yeah, valid claim. Had relevant, sufficient evidence.
Yeah.
And then it made that connection, right?
Yeah.
So we were discussing up here, so for high school, that might not be like the best answer, you know? This is not like, oh my gosh, this is the best answer ever. But this would be like just a quick, this is just a question that is actually built into a lesson. So you might want to just do a quick write. It's not going to be an essay. So, you know, just something, do they understand this? Are they getting the gist of this lesson? You know, so. Which responses were the weakest? So if 2 was the strongest, which one was like, do you feel like was the weakest response?
The very last one,
Okay, so why do you feel that 4?
because it is not even right. Jupiter wanted, I mean, Prometheus wanted to be king, that's why that
Okay.
is not even.
So they're way off in left field.
It's kind of like,
But then 3, does it give a claim?
No.
It just had evidence.
Yeah.
I think there is a little bit, because there's no claim, there's evidence, but there's nothing for it to support.
Yeah. So those are probably pretty equal. Like they're both going to be like zeros because the claim is not valid on number 4, right? So what about number 1? What made it weak? No textual evidence, right? It gave everything. Well, it couldn't make a connection because there was nothing to connect it to. But they kind of gave like
Well, and so here's why I have questions, because no,
Yeah.
they did not quote anything from the text, but obviously
Now,
they
8th
read
grade-
the text because it says that they
Yeah.
were cold and starving and miserable, and they weren't as happy
The
as they
thing
used
with
to
8th
be.
grade, their standards say they have to make a direct quote with
Okay,
another
okay,
citation.
that's good. Okay, so that's clear. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay. And that was a question.
That's not kind of
Right, let's talk about 2, can you paraphrase? Yeah.
Because it's obvious that they read.
So they're gonna get partial credit.
They're gonna
They skimmed it.
Yeah.
Which is most likely what you have in these, they didn't read, they skimmed through it. and tried to-
So number 1, you would give partial credit to because they gave a valid claim. They did give some of their thinking, about that with, but they just didn't give that textual evidence.
Good,
They're indirect quotes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which was Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we're gonna capture our learning for this session. So on page 31, you have 3 questions. What is a text-dependent question? How do text-dependent questions and tasks support students in understanding complex text? And what are the 3 criteria for strong student response? Okay, so for your do now, for this next session, okay, so we're gonna be talking about direct vocabulary. But for your do now, starting on page 33, you have the directions on 33, I think, and then, yeah. And then, all the way through 36, you have the story of Prometheus, so part 2. So just read through that story and highlight words that you think might be important to teach within this text. So what's important to teach within this text? And then discuss which words you highlighted and why.
Yeah.
So which words do you want to teach? And don't highlight the whole thing, you know.
I just changed the font or made it bigger. Having it done with all of these claims, it's not like with every
You might, you know, when I say like,
They don't pay attention to that.
we're gonna talk about that, like the difference between giving and the word and so once you've highlighted words, just kind of discuss some of the words that you chose and why you think you might have to teach those.
golden age.
Kinfolk. I think haste and distress. Either blacksmith, forge and business.
like around.
I was here when I was four.
Toilet, hydrant, toilet, casket.
Did you get bored?
I also got worried.
I thought about
They should know what time, know about it, time. The eighth graders.
And it's very important to this class.
Exactly. That's key window. And that's what you say that's what. And that's what window thought.
All right, so we're not gonna spend time discussing the words we chose right now. We will like in just a few minutes. So I'm just gonna go ahead and move on. So our objectives for today are just to explain what direct vocabulary instruction is. And then we're gonna apply a 5-step protocol for explicitly teaching vocabulary and distinguish between words that require relatively more time and attention and from words that require less time and attention. So this is our agenda for today. Just take a moment to read through it and review. All right, so as you remember from Module 2, which was yesterday, we did the indirect vocabulary. We had those 2 core approaches to building students' vocabulary: direct vocabulary instruction and indirect vocabulary instruction. Remember that when we talk about indirect vocabulary instruction, that's where students are like reading independently and they're seeing those words used in many different many different contexts. So conversations, read alouds, independent reading are all essential to indirect vocabulary instruction. Direct vocabulary instruction provides explicit instruction of and practice with vocabulary words and context. So before, during, and after reading, as well as engaging the students in root words and word study, like root words, affixes, prefixes, suffixes, all that stuff. So the main differences are that direct instruction, direct vocabulary instruction has direct instruction from the teacher. Students have opportunities to practice with the word and the understanding of the word. And then they also can include that word study. So what does direct vocabulary instruction look like? So, it's important to point out that it might look different and depending on the word. So we might have words that require less time and attention, or we might also have those words that require more time and attention. So in this first half, we're going to look at in the second half, we're going to look at exactly how to distinguish between those 2 types of words and which ones we want to merit more time on. So for words that require less time and attention, a quick explanation might do. So let's see, will somebody read this quote aloud for me?
Yeah. In the first place, he ordered his blacksmith, Vulcan, whose forge was in the crater of a burning mountain, to take a lump of clay which he gave him and mold it into the form of a woman.
So if you're teaching this, you would stop after that or have the student stop and just say, a blacksmith is a person who makes objects out of metal, and a forge, in this case, is like the blacksmith's workshop. It's a large open fire he uses to heat the metal. So you might just say that and then move on and continue reading. But then there are other times that you have words that need more time and attention. So we're going to put our student hats on and we're going to dig into, put your student hat on. And we're going to dig into how to teach these words that require more time and attention. If Pandora had not shut down the lid so quickly, things would have gone much worse. But she closed it just in time to keep the last of the evil creatures from getting out. The name of this creature was Foreboding, and although he was almost a half out of the casket, Pandora pushed him back and shut the lid so tight that he could never escape. If he had gone out into the world, men would have known from childhood just what troubles were going to come to them every day of their lives, and they would never have had any joy or hope as long as they lived. So I want to take a moment to talk about this word foreboding. Here it is, used as a name. And normally we don't spend a lot of time on names or proper nouns. But as we learn in Prometheus Part 1, names of characters or creatures in this case are based on keywords that describe the characters. So for instance, we learned that Prometheus was known as forethought, which means to think far ahead. So I'm going to put a section of the text up here, and we're going to think about this creature's name, foreboding. What does the word foreboding mean as it's used here? So we're going to reread the text to find evidence that helps us support the meaning of the word. So why don't y'all just kind of discuss, So turn and talk with a partner and discuss the meaning of the word foreboding. You know what it means? Any idea?
Worry, being concerned with what comes and things.
All right, so let's look at this quote. If he had gone out into the world, men would have known from childhood just what troubles were going to come to them every day of their lives. So does that quote from the text help you understand maybe what foreboding means a little bit better? All right, so what in that quote makes you understand what foreboding means?
Troubles that are going to come to them every day of their lives.
Okay.
If he had gone out.
So if you knew what troubles were going to come to you every day of your lives, how would you feel?
Worried, worrisome,
anxious.
Mm-hmm.
Scared. Okay. So are there any word parts that can help us determine the meaning of this word? So if we want to confirm the definition we just inferred from the text, or we still aren't sure, we can also look to see if there are any word parts that help us out. So here I see the prefix for. I've seen this prefix a lot. So let's think of some words that have the prefix for. Forethought. And we saw forethought in Prometheus Part 1, right? What else? Foreshadowed. Before. Forward. Forecast. Forefront. Foreground. All of those. Foresee. Foreshadow. So, what does this prefix for mean?
Before, ahead of time.
Yeah, before, ahead of time, in front of, right? So let's define this word based on what we just identified in the text and in the word itself. So foreboding is a feeling that something bad is about to happen. As the black clouds began to gather and spin, a sense of foreboding filled me. I knew a tornado was just moments away from touching down. All right, so in your note catcher on page 37, I want you to convey or explain the meaning of the word foreboding using your own words and or pictures. So you can draw a picture to explain what the word foreboding means, or you can just write a summary of what we just said. So on page 37,
I would really go.
oh yeah, you have tons of pieces. And now I can know something about it. Yeah, and that gives them time to. My mom. She's not doing somebody else's work.
You know, you have
All right, I'm gonna give you about 1 more minute to wrap up your thinking.
Four crafts. Four crafts. I'm gonna make that part up.
on the 16th.
Yeah.
That's all.
I see some great pictures of tornadoes and volcanoes. All right, so now let's continue on with our word study. We're going to solidify our understanding of this word foreboding by making connections between this word and other words. So on your picture on page 37, you have a spot on a box that has a spot for you to complete the analogy. Foreboding is to blame, as ecstatic is to happy. And then you also have a box that you can generate as many synonyms for the word foreboding as you can. And remember, a synonym is a word that means the same.
Yes, and yes.
Well, I mean, yeah, I put.
Well, you could require the student. But this is more of, do they understand what the definition is?
Yeah.
And not like, can they regurgitate? The Foursquare one. Yes, I had boxes to do like. Yeah.
And then one was a drawing, one was an analogy, one was a synonym.
And
sentence.
Remember that? Yeah.
And so that you can do.
I use this all the time.
I was looking at some.
So I mean, like, that's basically the same thing. I mean, you can use all of this stuff and you change it up. So make them write an analogy, make them write, you know. Does anybody want to share their analogy? Foreboding is to blame, as ecstatic is to happy.
You have knowledge form from Madison, or you don't, you just give her one side?
Anxious, worried. Anyone else?
Do I have one for her?
All right, does anyone want to share some of the synonyms that they wrote? Okay. Dread.
Daunting, imposing.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so now, independently in your note catchers, you have a place to generate a new sentence using the word foreboding. Once you've done that, share it out with your partner or at your table.
Even myself, in freshman classes, I was drinking.
Every time I get that phone call, you think, oh my
It
God, what did I
wasn't.
do?
But at the time,
That's when the superintendent texted me, because I need to see you. No.
it's like you see the lights in the rear view, you hate everything you've ever done wrong, all in 1 second.
Right.
You realize I still had a pack of gum in 3rd grade.
Cassie, will you share your sentence? Okay. Hannah?
She's always been with us.
I'm not.
It's because we're quiet.
She's telling you guys where it's at.
I feel they for voting since there's the phone ring.
Anyone else?
The teacher was not in a bad way, but I'm always nervous
Oh, yeah.
about meeting
Yeah.
the kids.
I was never put that because
Standing in front of them, you know,
I get them too.
even after all these years.
Promoting
I've
is
stood in
bad.
front of
So now we're gonna take our student hats off. So what we just experienced was a protocol for vocabulary, direct vocabulary instruction. This protocol is actually in your note catcher on page 38. Let me give you about a minute to look through that. Page 38. All right, so think about the protocol and what we just experienced and engaged in. Which specific actions should we take to address the steps outlined in this protocol? So think about the specific things we did. You can call.
Well, the sentence with the word.
Write it down.
First,
Right.
talk about
A relationship.
organizing
Somebody else.
definitions.
Get somebody else to understand. We'll take it and we'll use synonyms.
Well, it's kind of just, use it in context.
So we read it.
All right, so
I'm
I
curious as fun.
just want to point out that steps 3 through 5 might take place within the same lesson, but they might also be used as maybe homework or take place over the course of many lessons. They don't have to happen in the moment. And also with steps 4 and 5, there are a lot of ways students can make connections with words. They can list synonyms, antonyms, they can place the word with similar words along a spectrum, showing the levels of intensity. So you might go with content, glad, happy, ecstatic, have them place them in order. And they can write and complete analogies. There are many different ways that they can work with those words and make connections with words.
I was thinking like the active, might need a more concrete example, like actual visuals or maybe a quick clip, video clip.
Yeah, that's what it
Yeah.
shows on here,
I would have-
number 4B.
That's
That's what it was just saying.
Sorry.
To relate it to real life.
right.
Yeah.
And that would stick in their mind more than just actually reading the text.
Yeah.
And then they could write their own sentence once they actually put it.
Exactly.
Like, well, that's all.
All right, so now we're gonna practice. You're gonna apply this 5-step protocol to map out a plan for how you provide direct instruction for the word distress. So I want you to work with a partner to do this. I'm actually gonna give each partner a little sticky. I'm gonna put up some sticky note stuff around chart paper. That stuff, the screen stuff. I'm gonna put some up and I'm gonna let you get up and work and create with the 5 steps. So you might want to pull this 5-step protocol out of your binder and bring it with you. So just grab a marker. There's some right here. If there aren't any on your table, grab a partner and come to a piece of chart paper. There's two up here.
And I'll put where right here.
There's one on that corner.
This one. No. We're just going right here.
So yeah, so you're taking that word and what would you do for each step to teach that word? So you're taking that word, distress, and what would you do for each of the 5 steps in order to provide direct vocabulary instruction?
Yeah. Sentence or paragraph, put it in there.
Come on. They're right there. Yeah, I think that's the right one.
Present the word.
Step one.
You can either write, read the word distress as it's used in the text. I mean, you can just write that instead of writing distress, you know what I mean? So don't just copy.
Context clues.
Right now.
So we want to have
So
what would definition of distress?
a context clue.
What would like do you might write distress and then what would you say? Well, you want to give them actual like their meaning. Yeah.
So there's context clues.
Distress. So step 2 is where you yeah.
Using the word correct.
So now yours, you know, you're gonna guide them to use those concepts. But you might give some context clues.
Well, I'm saying that that way they'll be using context clues. Just one sentence.
Gotcha. So I would do distress situation. Whatever is the case.
As long as you know, you
Yeah. And I missed it.
Just 3 days ago, we were worried about it. I have
So that
Is it the end?
Yeah, we'll just go ahead and do that.
it's not the whole story. Yeah.
Actually, you know what step 3 is?
Okay, first of all, I just saw the 3.
I don't know what that's about.
Anything else? I think
I still a new one, mixed up.
Okay, so
So one and two are still.
What do you want to do? She don't I don't have the
Two.
Let's see.
Two. So what we put on two of them.
Second hour?
Statement of fact. I'm like an obvious belt on it.
You want him back?
Three is our old two.
Very Wiley building. This is such a section of
So we can have it easy.
So we want to do 7.
Four is four.
You know what that is? No, this is that Robin showed, that Robin.
Mending wall.
Yes, we understand that one.
Not that we're not taking.
Alright, so these can have to be. She was,
Sorry. Tell you what. Good job, that is really impressive. Yes. Actually, it was my youngest. No, I was racing. I mean, he's not on there. It's not on.
Yeah, just like.
twin brother.
Okay,
well, she has them job. Oh my God. Science teacher. Are we sure she's not awesome? She's not. She's all.
Dobermans are built.
She's all. She has 4,800. Well, I mean, they just still, but he's that one they're not allowed in breeding stuff. Are these guys? What are we, wait.
Nobody's looking to kick them in the foot. It's
What I think. I was gonna tell you congratulations on being engaged, and then I saw. Just do it all really quick. Alright, so, I was like, I
What?
know what?
That's
I
what
believe.
I was telling her this morning.
I had no idea.
I thought she was kidding me when she said we got married Friday yesterday.
We get it still big time.
Maybe I did not.
He probably told us to that.
So what hours did you?
Be responsible with your stuff.
I agree.
It was sitting in your desk when we go to the classroom thing, or is it in the chair? I saw it there.
All right. So now that we have an understanding of what direct vocabulary instruction is and what it looks like, but now we have to know how to distinguish between these words that require more time and attention than those that require less. So on page 41, so y'all had a spot in your note catcher. We just did it on the chart paper instead of, you know. So on page 41, there's a little article by David Levin, and I'm gonna give you just a couple of minutes to read through it, and then we have some discussion questions. So read through page 41, the article on page 41.
I'm looking to see. What was that?
I don't know. I think it was a, sorry.
Just,
I got it.
so what do you want me to do?
I don't care.
I don't know, you said you could put on music. It would be helpful if she did have a.
Yeah, for
Well, not just that, but if you're taking all your electives and you didn't go off planning except for one, that may help.
But then his schedule will have to be changed.
yeah, that's
We used it.
I just take it out. Well, there's multiple other people that are already in there. So,
Well, there'll be other things. We can switch sides and have to work around. We do social studies at the end.
All right, so discuss according to this text, this article, which words merit relatively less time and attention, and which words merit more time and attention. So what does this article say?
Words that understand the meaning, words that will see in context, is words that certain families do.
So
See.
you've got a space on page, no, you don't, yeah. Yeah, no, not yet, don't, sorry. That was my fault. I thought you had space. All right, so
Okay, your question was, what ones don't require,
which words should require more time and attention and which words require less?
you want to write that down?
so the ones you need to forward.
Just discuss.
Oh,
And
more, you said you were answering the one where it's already more.
What's question? That's what you got.
So let's talk about the more. So which words require more time and
You were
attention?
answering that.
So if they've never seen or heard it,
Has multiple meanings.
multiple meanings, more abstract.
Meaning words that they need to understand the meaning.
Yeah, they need to understand, they need it to understand the meaning of the text.
Probably most important.
Which I like it.
Words they'll see multiple times.
Yes.
Yeah, in the future.
And even words that appear in other, like, yeah, and other contents, like in other academic areas. And then what about less times? Less time and attention. Concrete, one meaning,
Simple.
right? Something you can like just, yeah.
Single meaning.
Or like blacksmith, like we can just tell you what a blacksmith is and we can move on. We don't have to do a whole word study around the word blacksmith. So, according to this text, words that are concrete with single meanings, words reflecting meanings that are part of the student's experience and unlikely to show up again are all words that require less time and attention. And then abstract words, words with multiple meanings, words reflecting unfamiliar meanings, words that will occur commonly in academic texts, and words that are part of a word family are words that you should spend more time and attention teaching. So, you may still be thinking there are a lot of words to teach. So a key takeaway to keep in mind, particularly as you prioritize which words to teach, is that we must address words that are central to the meaning of the text. So in other words, if students do not know the meaning of this word and it will impede their ability to understand the text, these are the words that we must address. These words are core to the text and must be explicitly addressed. It's important to point out that the list of criteria we just examined applies to these 4 words. It doesn't mean that they are core to the central of the meaning of this text that they need more time and attention. So if it's a concrete word like blacksmith, it should still be or could still be addressed relatively quickly. So now, what I want you to do is go back to the story of Prometheus Part 2, and you highlighted words throughout. So go through and find one word, or at least one example of a word that merits less time and attention, and one example of a word that merits more time and attention. You have an T-chart on page 42 of your note catcher that you can record this on. Yeah. And then explain your rationale for each of those words. So go back and look at what you highlighted or underlined or marked for your at the beginning of the section.
If you read it, it's got the meaning right after it, so it could be an easy one.
Students need to learn that much, but you might not explicitly teach it. So they might learn through reading. They might, or in another content.
The golden age.
Probably the majority of the words that you learn are going to be incorrect vocabulary. They would be turned out.
Golden age.
Page 42. It's the history. It was important. Page 6. It has I didn't put. That's what I did.
There's like one in the definition. And if you don't understand what they figure out, it's not going to affect your understanding.
He just hates it.
All right, so what were some examples of words that you thought would require less time and attention? So blacksmith, we said that. What about another, was there another one? Kinsfolk. If people say they're kin to somebody else, that would just be, that'd be easy to be like, yeah, real quickly. What else? Anybody else?
Haste,
Do what?
haste,
Haste, puny, forge. All right, so what would be what would be one example of a word that requires more? Golden age. Do what? Tyrant.
curiosity.
Curiosity. What else? Alright. So before we end the session, of course, it's important for us to summarize and capture our learning from it. Just take a few minutes to reflect on these three questions and record your responses in the space on page 43 in the note catcher. So what is direct vocabulary instruction? What does it look like? So the 5 steps, and how do you distinguish between words to spend more or less time on. And so once you've done that, we're going to take just a quick break for about 10 minutes. If y'all, we'll just say be back at 10. So if it's 9:44, you can finish this and then take a break.